The virus keeps spreading, and the economy is stalled, and death tolls are rising, and experts warn that it's going to get worse. What can the government do? We're joined by Chris Liu. Now, Chris is a former veteran of the Obama administration. He served as the former Deputy Secretary of Labor. He's in Washington. All right, Chris, what's the economic impact of the coronavirus?
It's going to be severe, Larry, but I don't think we quite know the extent of it yet. We don't know if this is a 2-week shutdown of the or 2-month shutdown of the economy, but whether it's one or the other, for working men and women in this country, about 58% of workers in this country are hourly wage workers. This is food service workers. This is retail workers. None of those people are getting paid. They're all filing for unemployment insurance. We've got a whole industry of independent contractors, gig workers that aren't going to be able to get paid and can't get unemployment insurance. And we just see a slowdown in the rest of the economy right now. We've got schools closing, we've got businesses closing. And so it's important to provide relief as quickly as possible to individual workers who are affected, as well as small businesses.
Is it going to get worse before it gets better?
Larry, unfortunately, I think it's going to get much, much worse. And I think depending on how long this goes on, it'll tell us what the recovery is. The problem now is we have too many workers in the country who live paycheck to paycheck. Small businesses in this country generally operate with a very slim profit margin. So they can probably withstand workers, small businesses, maybe a week or two of disruption. But boy, if this goes on for a month or so, I'm worried that a lot of those small businesses will never recover. And then just the disruptions throughout society, whether it's school kids not working, whether it is just the long-term health implications of thousands or potentially millions of people being sick. I'm just like everyone else praying for the public health crisis to get resolved, and then we'll deal with the economic damage at the end.
You're advocating a 1 to 3 month economic shutdown. What does that entail?
Well, I don't know if it's a 1 or 3 month shutdown. Here's what I do know, is that this is a public health crisis, and we need to resolve the public health crisis first before we deal with any kind of assessing what the economic recovery should look like. So right now, what I would do is ensure that workers get money in their bank accounts so that they can buy groceries, so they can pay their rent. Small businesses be given a forbearance on their lease payments. And then I think in general throughout the society, we look at all the different ways that we can put off some of the debt that people have to pay every month. Again, whether it's student loan debt, auto debt, car debt, just to basically ensure that we can kind of keep some sense of financial stability until this public health crisis eases up. And when that happens, we can then consider broader bailouts to other larger companies.
Someone who has shown out in this, mostly, I guess, is Governor Cuomo of New York. Would you agree with that? And conversely, how effective is the president?
Well, I think the real superstars, Larry, in this public health crisis have been the governors. I'm thinking not only Governor Cuomo, Governor Inslee in Washington State, Governor Newsom in California, even Governor Pritzker in Illinois. And really, the front line of response is state officials who have to make the difficult decisions about closing businesses and schools, who have to deploy their public health officials to help monitor the situation. And governors have shown remarkably stable, competent leadership. It does stand in stark contrast to the schizophrenic attitude that this president has shown. For 2 months, he basically dismissed the seriousness of the crisis. Then he kind of did 180 and suggested that people stay in their homes. Now, by all accounts, he seems to be wavering in that, suggesting that maybe the economic damage is too severe. He continues to kind of fall back on his old tactics, whether it's blaming his political opponents, attacking the media, spreading false information about potential cures. What the president would be well served to do is really just to take a step back and trust the career experts in his administrations to make these decisions.
He's talked a lot about the cruise industry and how important that is and important it is to save it, but they're sailing under different flags. They're not registered in America.
You're absolutely right, Larry. I mean, look, before we go into large corporate bailouts, whether it's the cruise industry or the airline industry and hotels, I want to think first about American workers. I want to think about those people who are trying to figure out how they're going to make their rent payment at the end of this month. I'm thinking about small businesses, the mom and pop deli and the laundromat and the diner. Those are the people we should be helping at this point. And once we get past this crisis, we can then assess what are the larger companies that we should be helping out. Look, the cruise industry certainly employs a lot of people. As you point out, these are not, they're not flagged, headquartered in the United States, but they do employ a fair amount of people, and they should certainly be considered for relief, but so should so many other industries in this country. But again, let's focus on workers first and small businesses.
How do you think the business community is reacting? How are they doing?
Well, I think they're struggling. I think they're struggling because you're getting mixed messages from the president. And in the absence of federal guidance, consistent federal guidance, what you see is a kind of a patchwork of 50 states making decisions, and in many cases, a lot of mayors making decisions as well. And that's a very complicated environment for businesses to react to. Particularly like in the airline industry, you see huge drop-offs in their businesses right now. And you do wonder at some point how much longer some of these companies could stay going. And so this is a very tough environment in many ways, much more challenging than the 2008, 2009 financial crisis.
Overall, how's the president doing?
Well, I certainly wouldn't give him a 10 out of 10 as he graded himself. Look, he certainly has been engaged, but I do think the challenge is these daily press conferences that he's giving are just not helping at all. Constantly, he's making claims that aren't true, that require other people in his administration to then clarify it. He again sort of views it more as a political exercise of how he can make himself seem as good as possible, a chance to attack his opponents. And as I said, he's wasted months of our response efforts by dismissing the seriousness of this crisis. And unfortunately, far too many people of his followers still continue to minimize the seriousness of this because they're remembering the president's comments from earlier on.
What do you think of extending the tax deadline to July 15th from April 15th?
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think their federal agencies have done a lot of other steps that are noteworthy, whether it is putting a hold on foreclosures, whether it's pushing back student loan payments. It's like all of these things can help because what you want to do is to create some measure of financial stability for workers right now so that they can just get through every day, so they can just put food on their table. You don't want to put any additional stresses or certainly any additional debt payments onto them until we start to get businesses back up and running again.
Do you think the business communities in general are acting well?
Well, I think they're trying to, but as I said, I think this is a challenging environment for any of them. And I think, they are making the decisions that they need to make. But I do think that there's been kind of this rush of large companies to go to Congress to ask for bailouts. Meanwhile, there are a lot of other people suffering right now. So, look, I think these are challenging circumstances for anybody. So I'm not going to blame anyone at this point for their conduct.
Do you think Joe Biden should be seen more? Should he be active in a way, as he's expected to be the Democratic? He'll be the nominee for president. Should he be more vocal and open now?
Well, he is starting to be. I mean, this week he will be doing a series of shadow briefings talking about the president's response to coronavirus and what he as a potential president would do. It is one of the challenges right now because in an environment where you've got large parts of the country under lockdown, you can't do a big campaign event. He certainly can't even do a press conference, a live press conference. He can't even shake hands with supporters. He can't raise funds. There will come a point at which he can do that again. But at this point, the best thing he could do is what he's trying to do, which is to continue to push out his plans of what he would do.
What do you think of the daily press briefings that the president is holding?
You know, Larry, I don't think they're helpful at all. Well, let me say this. I think it's helpful when we hear from the vice president in the coordination efforts of the federal government. I think it's certainly helpful when we hear from medical experts like Dr. Fauci, but I don't think it's helpful when the president gets up there and he basically treats some version of his campaign rallies where he feels the need to praise his own performance, to attack his enemies, and to dispel false information. I really wish these briefings were left more in the hands of the experts instead of the president.
Chris Lewis, always, thank you so much.
Thank you, Larry.